For generations, radio-controlled model aviation was one of the most wholesome technical hobbies in America. You built an airplane, often from wood and fabric. You learned aerodynamics, engines, electronics, patience, and judgment. You joined a local club, flew from a known field, and passed the craft from one generation to the next. It was not risk-free, but it had a culture of supervision and self-discipline. And the Academy of Model Aeronautics, the AMA, had spent decades earning credibility as the guardian of that culture. In 2012, Congress gave that culture extraordinary protection. Section 336 of the FAA Modernization and Reform Act told the Federal Aviation Administration that it could not make new rules for qualifying model aircraft. The conditions were familiar: hobby or recreation, visual line of sight, a 55-pound limit, deference to manned aircraft, and operation under the safety programming of a nationwide community-based organization. This was not absolute sovereignty, and the FAA retained enforcement power against dangerous operations. But it was the closest thing model aviation had to a self-governing franchise. Here is the crucial detail. Congress, not the AMA, wrote the legal definition. A model aircraft was simply an unmanned aircraft capable of sustained flight, flown within visual line of sight, and flown for hobby or recreation. The law did not say balsa aeroplane. It did not say fixed wing. It did not distinguish a hand-built scale model from a GPS-stabilized camera quadcopter. That ambiguity was dangerous. The AMA could have defended a narrow cultural boundary. Instead, it chose to erase one. By 2017, the AMA was telling its clubs that multirotors, commonly called drones, were just another flying machine. Its own words were unequivocal. From an AMA perspective, they are all simply model aircraft. AMA members were covered when flying a multirotor just like any other model aircraft. This sounded inclusive and forward-looking. It also spent the organization's most valuable asset, the accumulated safety reputation of traditional model aviation, on a rapidly expanding technology whose users, purposes, and operating locations were entirely different. The merger did not stop at the club gate. In March 2018, an unmanned aircraft campaign led and funded by the AMA explained that drone pilots had two legal options. The default was the FAA's Part 107 rule. The second, described as the only exception, was the special rule for model aircraft. In other words, the protection created around a disciplined, community-based hobby was now publicly marketed as the recreational drone exception. The old model aircraft world had become the legal shelter for the mass consumer drone market. That changed the politics. Congress was no longer being asked to preserve a small, supervised tradition with an exceptional safety record. It was being asked to preserve a broad carve-out for recreational unmanned aircraft while consumer drones multiplied, commercial operators demanded access, airports reported incursions, and security agencies worried about anonymous machines in sensitive airspace. The AMA did not cause every one of those pressures, but by insisting that the categories were one and the same, it made certain that traditional model aircraft would inherit all of them. The AMA saw the danger too late. In April 2018, it warned that repeal would be a devastating blow. 6 months later, Congress passed the FAA Reauthorization Act. Section 349 repealed the special rule for model aircraft and replaced it with the exception for limited recreational operations of unmanned aircraft, now codified at Title 49, Section 44809. The language tells the story. Model aircraft disappeared from the name. Recreational unmanned aircraft became the controlling category. The self-governing presumption was gone. Today, the FAA describes the law as a limited statutory exception. Traditional model flyers live inside the same federal framework as recreational drone operators, registration rules, an aeronautical knowledge test, airspace authorizations, altitude limits, community-based guidelines and, in many cases, remote identification. Some club flying sites receive accommodation and the AMA still advocates effectively at the margins. But advocacy inside an FAA system is not the same thing as the old congressional command that the FAA may not regulate qualifying model aircraft. There is a deeper reason this cannot simply be unwound. Not every consumer drone is a military-grade killing machine. but the underlying architecture is plainly dual-use: stabilized flight, first-person video, autonomous navigation, payload carriage, precise positioning, and remote control. In war, inexpensive multirotors have become reconnaissance systems, bombers, and one-way attack weapons. Legislators and security agencies cannot unlearn that fact. Once family model aviation and the broader drone category were joined in law and public language, the innocent side of the category became politically inseparable from the threatening side. That is the AMA's fatal mistake. It did not invent drones. It did not write Congress's broad definition, and it did not cast the final votes in 2018. But it chose institutional expansion over categorical defense. It treated every recreational unmanned aircraft as part of model aviation and offered Section 336 as their shelter. When the drone world became too large, too commercial, too disruptive, and too entangled with national security to remain lightly governed, the shelter was demolished with the old hobby still standing underneath it. The tragedy is not that drones entered aeromodeling. The tragedy is that the AMA failed to preserve a legally distinct home for traditional, line-of-sight, club-based model aviation before welcoming an open-ended technology category. Perhaps the hobby will survive in smaller enclaves. But every new federal requirement raises the cost of entry, ages the membership, and weakens the handoff to the next generation. A grandfather and a child flying a hand-built aeroplane are not a drone security problem. The law should have continued to know the difference. The AMA helped make sure it no longer could.